My name is Ben Russell. I am one of the engagement managers at Standards Australia. My job essentially is to facilitate involvement from experts like yourselves by various different organisations and companies, and I'll get into how that works shortly. I look after a couple of different sectors at the moment. That will probably change shortly. We're doing a little bit of a reorganisation, but for the moment, I look after health, mining, public safety, consumer products, and education. So I don't have, a lot of spare time, as you can probably imagine. I was going to tell everyone that I came over here just for this event, but I won't lie. I was coming here for something else, but it's great that it all aligned. Let's see how the tech goes to start. Hey, all right. So very, very briefly, I'll get through some of this as quick as I can, and we can get to questions and conversations. And if any of you know this information already, I do apologize. Please try and stay awake. Standards Australia is an independent, non-for-profit, non-government organisation formed in 1922. For those of you who have ever seen that big coat hanger-shaped bridge in Sydney, our first project was making sure that all the rivets that we used to build it were exactly the same size. And if you've travelled over it, welcome. We are Australia's member on the ISO and IEC, which is the International Organisation for Standardisation, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, respectively. It's a mouthful. Our agenda and priorities are driven by our stakeholders. So as Steve was sort of alluding to, if there's an issue, there's a problem, there's something you're not happy with, you can write to us and talk about changing it. We don't sit in some ivory tower somewhere deciding what the rules should be. It's not how it works. And we try and form a partnership with government, industry, and the community and build trust. We facilitate the development of internationally harmonised standards and other solutions. What we don't do, though, is we don't make laws, we don't make regulation, we don't test, we don't certify, we don't accredit. So we purely help develop, facilitate, publish the standards. All the other parts of that infrastructure piece are done by third parties. For any of you who have seen the title of the standard and wondered what it all means and what all the jargon is for, very, very briefly, I've just used an example here for something we published a couple of weeks ago. Thank you. So AS, Australian Standard, it then has an arbitrary designation, 3811, followed by the year and the title. You might see them be slightly different. You might see ASNZS, that means it's an Australian and New Zealand standard. ISO or IEC means it's an international one. Or you might see AS, ISO, or AS, IEC. That means it's an international one that we've adopted identically and we haven't made any changes to it. And then there's a few other kinds of document types as well. I won't go through them all. Everything we do is based on consensus and has to have a net benefit for Australia. So we'll get a proposal in and we'll be asked to do something. We don't just do it because it's fun or because we think it's great. We have to actually demonstrate that the proposal that's being made to us is going to either make an economic improvement, a social improvement, environmental improvement. We don't just do work for the sake of it. Very briefly, I'm sure most of you know this, but just a little bit on the differences between standards and regulation. Regulations, legislation, they're things that a government department, regulator, the government themselves have mandated but said, you must do this. Our standards in this context and in most contexts that we talk about are voluntary documents. So when we publish them, they're a piece of paper that essentially is nothing more than a piece of paper. They're guidelines, recommendations, suggestions for best practice. If the government comes along and says, actually, this is now a part of our regulation, then it becomes law. On their own, they're voluntary documents. If the government chooses to refer to them, they are legislation, they are regulation. You'll find, for example, an example of the Safe Work Australia will have a model code of practice. Each state then can actually decide what they do and don't want to include in their code of practice. A standard that might be mandatory by law here might not be mandatory in the Northern Territory or New South Wales. This is what we refer to as the standards and conformance infrastructure. So you can see at the top, policy, regulation, contracts, underpinned by standards, tested then by conformity assessment bodies. Those conformity assessment bodies are accredited by bodies like NADA and JASANS. Then there's market surveillance to make sure that people are actually doing what they say that they're doing. And that's all underpinned by, I like to refer to them as probably like our quiet little cousins in the National Measurement Institute. If we say something has to be 3 meters, they tell us exactly how long 3 meters is. I don't think they get credit they deserve. They're quite important, but they're also quiet little silent partners in most of this. A little bit now about the standards development process in Australia. So we don't work directly with companies generally. We work with what we refer to as nominating organizations. So these are generally national member base, not-for-profit. It's not a requirement that they're not-for-profit, but it's a preference, representing a particular point of view. So we don't work with advanced care, or we don't work with Rawlins, for example. We work with the International Health Institute of Australia, and we say, listen, we're looking for the perspective of people in this field. We would like you to nominate someone from all of your membership base that can speak on behalf of all of your members, not just that one company. So that way we know that we're not just hearing from one place. If we're talking to a professional association, we're getting a much broader viewpoint. We get together these different nominating organizations for different perspectives, depending on what standard we're doing. I always use furniture as an example because it's simple and I'm a simple guy. If we're doing stands for tables, we want to hear from people who've made tables, people who sell tables, people who use tables, people who regulate tables, people who test tables, people who buy tables. We want to hear all those different perspectives. So we get a different organization that represents all those different viewpoints. And from those, we get our committee members. Those committee members form technical committees, of which they'll usually nominate drafting leaders or working group members for individual projects. There'll also be a committee chair. That's then underpinned by Standards Australia infrastructure. So there's a project manager. They work with the committee all the time. And then there's support people like myself in engagement. We've got publishing services, program management, we've got marketing teams, we've got editors, we've got all sorts of stuff that's in there to help the teams out. These are just a couple of different examples here of the different categories that we look for when we look for different nominating organizations. So we work with government, we work with industry associations like yourselves, manufacturers, employer representative bodies, unions, basically any perspective that we need, consumers, to just try and make sure it's balanced. So we won't always have all of these on any one committee. We don't, believe it or not, get a lot of representatives on consumers when we're talking about how to protect people's eyes through lasers and radiation. That's pretty specific and niche. We make sure that the people who need to know that are there. But for something, for example, like button batteries, we make sure we've got consumers in the room, testers, regulators, whatever the really relevant voices need to be. This is our standards development process. So it starts off with a proposal being submitted. Could be from people like yourselves, could be anyone off the street. You really don't need any qualifications to submit a proposal. That will come through to us. We'll review it to make sure that it actually meets the criteria of a proposal in the first instance. Then we'll have an initial meeting with the proponent just to talk them through it, make sure we understand what they're actually trying to suggest. We're not the technical experts in any of this work. I couldn't tell you anything about what you guys do for a living. I just can't. But we need to make sure that we understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish. After that, we'll probably refine the proposal with you as the proponent just to make sure that we've got everything done, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. Then we have to take it out for stakeholder consultation, which will be a minimum of 2 weeks. Often takes a lot longer. It depends on how complex it is, how controversial it might be, how niche it might be. But at least 2 weeks it goes out, and we contact all the different associations, organizations, stakeholders, government, etc., that we think should have an opinion or might have an opinion. But it's open to anyone from the public to log onto our portal and have a look, to comment on that proposal. I won't say, Steve sent us proposal, he is kidding himself, he has no idea what he's doing, or Steve's just doing this because his company makes this product, and if he does it this way, he's going to make more money. You have to get all these different perspectives, all these different opinions, work it all through, and essentially decide if we have broad support, either for or against the idea, and put that in a report to a governance body, which meets once a month. I used to meet once every 6 months. I have no idea how they got everything done. They would have met for a week, I think. And they'll go through all the proposals every month that we get in that we're ready to look at, and they'll decide if they approve it or reject it. If it's approved, goes through to the next stage, project approval and the kickoff. So the committee comes together, they'll organize who's going to do what, who's put their hands up to be a drafting leader, who's going to do what section, work out a schedule, how long it's all going to take, essentially assign roles and responsibilities. Then they're going to get to drafting. Once they start drafting, that process can last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on what it is. The project that I called up at the start, that took about 4 years to finish. There was a lot that needed to be done. We rely on all these contributors that come from these different organizations, and they're not getting paid. So we have to coordinate 15, 20, sometimes 30 people to take time out of their jobs to come to the committee meetings, to do the extra work. If we could pay them and get it all done in a couple of weeks, it'd be a lot quicker. But we just can't. This is the way the system works, and that's why some of this stuff takes so long. Once that drafting process is complete, The draft then gets put up online for 9 weeks. So that's any member of the public, anyone, private citizen, people from any company in Australia can go on there and see the draft in form and make comments on any section they like. They can do general comments. They can do deeply technical, specific comments. As much as you like, we encourage it. After that 9-week period is over, it goes back to the committee and they have to go through every single comment. They don't have to necessarily accept the comment that you make, but they have to go through every single comment and go, noted, we're not fixing it because X, Y, Z, or, well, good catch. Yep, we're going to change that. Or they might just write this comment's irrelevant because it might be something a bit odd. Every single comment is gone through. Once the committee's gone through and made all those changes, it'll go through to a committee ballot, which will last for 2 weeks. And that means that every committee member is casting a vote on the final version of the draft on behalf of their nominating organisation. In some cases, we'll have to go for the public comment again because we got such a ridiculous amount of comments, or the comments were significant enough to change the actual outcome of the document that we need to make significant changes. And we've changed it so much, we need to go around again. That's what happened with the one I put up earlier. When we do that, you can only comment on what changed from the first one, which is a little bit odd, but that's the way the system works, unfortunately. Once the committee's balloted, assuming everything goes well, gets approved, then we publish, and then it enters the systematic review period. So every 5 years, we're supposed to review a standard. We don't get to them every 5 years all the time because there's so many of them, but the idea is that we review them at least every 5 years. That can happen sooner if someone puts in a proposal to review them sooner, but generally speaking, it's about a 5-year cycle. So very briefly, a little bit about what we do with the international community. So as I mentioned before, we're Australia's member to ISO and IEC. These numbers, I think, are pretty close to accurate, and it wouldn't be much either way. They do change, though, from time to time. So we're a participating member on just under 300 ISO committees and 82 IEC committees. We're an observing member on 84 and 39, and we hold the secretariat and or chair role on 25 and 5, respectively. For a country of Australia's size, we punch massively above our weight in terms of the amount of participants we have on committees, the amount of committees we're involved in, and the leadership roles that we have as well. Some of these secretariats we've held for 40 plus years, and we do them over countries like China, America, England, India, who have hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of people. And our actual percentages of participation is massive in that respect. So Australia massively bats above our weight in that. The way that the committee system works at an international level, you'll have a technical committee in ISO or IEC. So I've just picked an example, ISO TC 209, so Technical Committee 209, clean rooms and associated controlled environments. Every country in the world that wants to participate essentially has to petition to ISO and say, hey, look, we'd like to contribute. ISO says, yeah, great, welcome aboard. Then you have to form a mirror committee. So we have a technical committee, which is called ME60, Control Environment. That becomes Australia's voice to that ISO committee. So any decision, any work will get an email from the Secretariat of 209. We're about to kick off a new project, call for experts. Those experts will come from ME60. We're about to publish a standard. We're having a final vote. Please cast Australia's vote. We will speak to ME60 and say, right, here's the vote. Here's the idea. What do you guys think? We'll ask them to come to a consensus position, whether they either approve of it, broadly speaking, reject it. Maybe we can't agree either way and we'll abstain, but that opinion comes from ME60. I won't go through all this. Essentially, this is just the ISO standards development process. Pretty much the same thing. The stages just have slightly different names because, of course, they do. Why would you standardize standards? This finally onto some IHEA stuff. So this is just a brief snapshot of the involvement that the IHEA has at standards. So you have seats on 6 different Standards Australia technical committees. 2 of those are currently vacant and need a nominated member. Those are HC17 and ME80. I won't read all that, but essentially they're just the scope of the committee. So it's medical gas systems and air filters. Very important stuff. You guys know that more than I do. Currently, you do have seats on those committees, and if there are experts in this room, please feel free to contact Steve and tell him you'd like to participate. And then these are the other committees that you have seats on that currently have people in them. So there's ME60 controlled environment. You've got valves for primarily for use in warm and hot water systems, really catchy names. Processing of medical and surgical instruments, and my personal favorite, TE16. personal alarm systems, which is where that standard came from earlier. And I say my personal favorite because it's given me no end of hell over the last 18 months because we made a boo-boo and it was my job to fix it. But we got that. Look, I won't go through all these details, but these are just a number of the standards that your members have contributed to over the past couple of years at least. They're all relatively recent as far as standards are concerned. Long, very snappy titles, but all very important. This is the kind of work that we do all the time. We've got one up there, for example, that's a ballot right now. So that ballot, I think, will close in a few days. So we'll find out what happens there. Very exciting stuff. But the point is that this is the kind of work that your members are involved in. And I have no idea what your individual expertise is in this room, but hopefully some of you know what this talks about. And that's pretty much it of me standing up here and giving a speech. Do you have any questions? I'll be happy to answer anything I can, but please don't feel that I'm embarrassed. If you don't ask questions, I'm used to people being unable to wait for me to leave.
Ben, that's the process of that initial proposal. Does it carry more weight if it comes from an organization rather than an individual?
So we say no, but it does, because a proposal can come from anyone. But if a proposal is coming from a fully endorsed organization, it's a national body, has a lot of members, we already know that there's a huge amount of support that proposal has. We already know it's got the backing of the whole IHEA, for example, rather than John Smith or Jane Smith on the street. You thought, you know what, this would be a really good idea. Let's fix air filters. But if we have an organization that specializes, it has members that specialize in that topic, you know the proposal is coming from a highly technical place. We know it's being supported by a national member base. It's something that we're going to take very seriously. We take them all seriously. But going through that channel, going through your organization, you are going to make things a lot easier and a lot quicker.
I guess in a similar vein, when it goes out for draft for public comment, if it's associated with IHEA subjects, I would put it out, make sure that the members are aware that they're seeking comments, and we can consolidate the actual comments. I guess, again, that holds more weight when it's being reviewed by the working group.
Yeah, look, I would encourage you to do both. If you have the time, I would encourage you to consolidate your comments with Steve, but also then go in and make comments as well. So if we're getting comments from IHA and Sally or John, and they're pretty much saying the same thing, there's obviously something there. You don't need to tell us where you work for, who you work for, we can make that comment. Stack the tech a little bit with technical expertise, that's fine. But absolutely, we encourage you to make as many contributions to those comments as you can, personally and through your organization.
And can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
We are often at the loggerheads and no disrespect to any consultants like we do with consultants that they often throw this papers, oh, this is designed as per Australian standards, it's meeting all the Australian standard requirements. As per your presentation, that is not actual right thing. We should be looking at what we need rather than what this thing is Australian standard.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So it all depends, right? It's industry to industry. It's case by case. In building and construction, I can't remember how many now. Lots of our standards are within the National Construction Code. If your state legislates or regulates against the National Construction Code, you bloody well have to comply with those standards, and you need to make sure you are. But if you're working in an industry where they're not regulated and not legislated against, and you don't necessarily think it's best practice to follow that standard, you don't have to. The volume means don't. If a consultant's telling you that you should be following something that doesn't seem right to you, write to us and let us know. Maybe the standard needs updating. But you should be doing best practice, what's safe, what works for you. We're not here to tell you that what's in the standard is perfect or that you absolutely must follow our standards. We're not police. If it's not fit for purpose, don't use it.
It's one of the American gases on which we are having enormous amount of headache.
Right.
Because it has a lot of things which are, if you are doing IGU, you can't have that only 70% of the outlets will be used. Cannot be a case that you design that in. Your capacity for ICU should be 100% because you will be using probably at any given time all the outlets. So we can't have their systems which somebody said, oh, it's meeting the Australian standard because as per standard we need to only provide you 70% of the capacity.
Well, I would encourage them to write a proposal to change that standard. We will take that and then we will shoot around everyone that we know and anyone we can think of, and we'll see if they agree with you. And if the board people agree with it, we'll change the standard.
But just on that standard is at the final stages of review. It should be that 9-week public comment.
Right. Okay. So if that's the case, please jump on and make a comment. Feel free to send me an email and I can follow up for you and see where we're up to. If sometimes the website's a little bit behind, and I can check it and see what's going on. I can see what we're likely to change or not change, and I can get back to you.
Yes, on that one, Shyam, I guess that can be my first order of actual business is, so obviously you can make your personal submission, but then to add weight to it, we can see additional comments from IHEA members. Hopefully they align and that gives weight to our response.
Yes, when 1851 was first created, with sections of all different types of standards about maintaining your fire systems, I went to a forum just like this, and we had a lawyer speaking about 1851. But he wasn't speaking about the standard. He was speaking about your obligations to follow the standard and the ramifications of not following the standard. Now, 1851 wasn't actually gazetted in law in WA at the time. Okay, it is now, but it wasn't then. And he said, if I had a client and it was in your establishment and that got burnt and they got injured, I would take you for everything you've got. It's not that the Australian standard doesn't comply. It says, but it's best practice, right? And you've got to follow best practice. So when you see I think it's one of the revisions, I think it was 2010, maybe 2012 or something, it said that you had to test the accuracy of the smoke detectors. If you've got a can of smoke, you spray it, it goes off, right? But you had to check the sensitivity of it. We actually went back through Honeywell, who actually made the detectors, and they don't even know how to do that. So how does a clause like that get into the standard when the actual manufacturers of those devices doesn't even know how to test the accuracy of the equipment? So how does that happen?
So it's possible that there wasn't an organization at the time when we developed that standard or did that iteration of the standard that contributed or had someone to contribute or volunteer their time. Could be that they sent the wrong expert who didn't know enough about it and stayed quiet in the meeting, or that people just weren't aware that something was out for public comment.
So that's okay. But so when it goes to law, when the government comes along and says puts it into their regulations, who vets the actual requirements of the standard before it becomes law?
So that's between the regulators and the people in the government. We have no place in that.
You don't have any place.
They don't ask us permission to reference, nor do we petition them to reference either. They will either reference our standards or not, except in rare cases, for example, with the National Construction Code, where we're buried in. There's usually a 2-phase process, and I don't work with the construction stuff, so this is going to be a bit of a layman's version of it. We will do our process, and then we give it to the Australian Building Codes Commission. They will give it a bit of a once-over themselves and do a bit of a reference, a bit of a public comment sort of thing within their own group, and then come back to us and let us know if we've caused a problem. How they vet that's their business, and how the regulators make those decisions is their business. We publish the document, and it's completely up to people whether they use them, reference them or not.
So if the standard changes for whatever reason, the next revision changes, and the government's reference, let's say 2010 is what was in their law, and they say they don't always give a year. They should usually just give the standard peak. Which one do you comply with?
So we're going through something quite similar to that I'm going to use product safety examples at the moment. So the ACCC, they're going through a process now where they've got 49 mandatory product safety standards, and they reference 46 or something of ours. And most of them are older versions. So they're in the process now of reviewing them standard by standard to basically determine if they need to update them and if they're happy with the updated versions. As far as the law is concerned, what the ACCC says is the mandatory standard is a mandatory standard. If they say the 2012 version to comply with the law, you follow the 2012 version. Even we're up to 2026, you follow the 2012 to comply with the law. So whatever one the government tells you is the mandatory one is the one you need to comply with.
But that was another I was going to say. In Adelaide, South Australia, at that time, the South Australian government had referenced 1851 about 5 years beforehand, and it was so far out of date that they're saying, well, actually, this is really stupid. So how do how would you change that? Would you have to change it through the government, or would the standards Australia?
Petition government, and you'd say, hey, look, there's an updated version of this standard. We really encourage you to review the updated version of this standard because there's been changes made and we think that you should be reviewing that one. Or Standards Australia have gone off on a tangent here and they've changed the standard and they shouldn't have. Someone quick fix it and change it back. But yeah, anything to do with the government, it's the government's purview, decision, etc. We publish them, and it's up to the government to pick them up or not.
But how do you make your money?
We sell our standards most of the time. So you might have seen as well, there was a recent announcement that we're still working out all the details, but moving forward at some point in the very near future, any standard that is mandated by the government in regulation, in legislation, the government will actually be subsidising fully the cost of that standard for you to be able to access it online at no cost. So any International Construction Code, any ACCC references, anything that's in occupational health and safety codes of practice, very soon in the near future, you won't have to pay for that if you just want to read a copy of it online.
That's actually long overdue. So
yeah, we've been having people ask us about that for many, many years, and it's finally happening, which is great. The next thing we'll get is, well, why can't you make all of them free? Keep going on that. This is a great step in the right direction.
Going back to the question of when standards are empowered by regulations, if they don't state the year or the version, does that change the review process?
So I would have to confirm this. My understanding is if they don't reference the year, they're doing something that I think we call it dynamic referencing. Some people might call it ambulatory referencing. I think that means they're rolling the dice that they're happy with whatever next version it is. ACCC, as an example, are making it's part of their review on the mandatory standards. They're also asking if they should implement that process with I think it's with a 6-month safety net. So essentially they are saying, okay, what if we just reference whatever standard comes out that is in that space? And then they have 6 months whether to say, no, we're not happy with it, we're keeping the old one. Or if they don't, it just becomes law by default within 6 months. I don't know if they're going to go ahead with that. Other regulators might have that in motion already, but I can't tell you yes or no what that exactly is. I'd have to come back to it.
With the standards set as a standard 5-year cycle where it's new. So if considering that there are so many standards that you don't technically get to them in time, what drives the priority of its?
So we have a team that sits in the background and they just go through all the old standards. And essentially they hassle people like me to go out to the industry and say, hey, this standard's getting old. Can we have someone have a look at it, please? Someone put in a proposal. But in terms of setting priorities, we do our best to try and look at what's probably the greatest risk to public harm. Is it referenced in legislation? Is there a chance that if we don't amend this, there could be an injury or a death? Has there been a coronial inquiry in recent times? Basically, the greatest sort of risk to public safety or public disorder, we look at that and try and prioritize it that way. But again, we need people like yourselves, people from the public, to write the proposals, to revise them. So even if we get to it in time, we've got to go to the committee that looks after that standard and say, hey, look, 1, 2, 3, 4 is up. It needs to be reviewed. One of you guys needs to write a proposal, or someone else needs to write a proposal, or this thing is going to get to a point when we have to withdraw it because we can't stand by it anymore. Oh, don't withdraw it. We go, cool. Someone has to write a proposal then, because we can't say anymore. It's 12, 15 years old now. We can't say that it's current anymore. We're gonna have to pull it out. And we pull it out, it'll still exist. You can still use it, but we won't be standing by it as current standard. So we try and encourage people to get this done and get it through as much as we can. You get instances where you've got really old standards with committees that actually don't exist anymore. In which case we put things out for basically it's like a public comment on withdrawing the standard. And if no one tries to save it, we withdraw it. But often you'll get one person that pops up and says he can't withdraw that because we still use it in this one particular instance. Like, cool, write a proposal, and they don't. Sorry, have to withdraw it.
So the involvement of the IHEA with our would be is a valuable tool for you as well, because you have a sort of a funnel where these sort of proposals or things can be directed to it.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And look, I'll give you. I'm going to keep going back to nurse alarms as an example. So you guys are members of the IHEA. But whoever's on the committee for IHA does not work for you. No. So we were in a situation where this particular nurse call alarm system standard was ongoing. It was approved for a project before I started as standards just under 4 years ago. The project kicked off. I think I've been there for 2 or 3 months. Never heard a word about it. No dramas, great. No noise, it's great. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then about a year ago now, probably it's been, I think, I got 6 different manufacturers of nurse call alarm systems all send me an email and say, hey, you guys doing the wrong thing. You don't have the right representation on this committee, and the standard's going to be all out of whack. It's going to push people out of the market. It's not going to work. So I'm like, whoa, hang on, what's going on? So I've run around. I've tried to find different organizations to go, right, I need a manufacturer of nurse call alarm systems. Unfortunately, none of them told me they were members of different organizations. I couldn't find anyone. I suggested they all go and join one so we could work with them. We ended up having to make a special exception to allow a couple of direct companies to join the committee on a temporary basis so we could get additional manufacturers' perspectives in to make sure that these systems actually work. And we did, and we saved the standard. Otherwise, we probably would have had to start again. But ideally, we'd have an organization like the IHEA who would just say, hey, we're specialists in nurse call alarm systems. I've got a guy, I've got a lady, in they go, this is my expert. They work for this company, but they're representing us. So we need that perspective to make sure that our standards are actually good. So if we don't have organizations like the IHA banging down the door telling us that we're making mistakes or that we need to make changes, we will put out terrible standards that don't help anybody. And then they'll all buy them and we'll go out of business. And that's not what we're trying to do.
What about feedback?
Sorry?
What about feedback? One of the classic examples is the nurse call standard. We've been waiting for that for sharp years now, okay? And again, a lot of redevelopments were done without the new standard. I suppose they reference the principles of the old withdrawal standard. So that was the train of thought down. What's my train of thought? Oh, nurse call standards, right? When you get nurse call standards, we wanted to say I have to know one of the person who was sitting on your committee. And say, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Because our members need to know what's in the pipeline and when there's going to be an estimated end date so that we can actually start planning all those sorts of things.
So if you've got a member on the committee, that's the first place you go to. Your member on the committee can pretty much tell you anything and everything that happens in those committee meetings. There's this perception that's gone on for a number of years that it's all secret squirrel and it's all private and it's committee in confidence and no one's going to talk about it. It's not true. You can, if you're on a committee, it's chatting in house rules. You can essentially tell anyone and everyone what happened, what was said. You just can't say who said what. You can't share a version of the draft outside of the committee because the draft may change. And if we have wrong versions of the draft circulating, someone could get hurt and would protect people's privacy. So you can't share the committee meeting minutes. But your member should report back to the IHEA and say, hey, nurse call's going great. We're halfway through drafting. We expect it to go to public comment in July, all going according to plan. I'll check back with you in a few weeks. Or nurse call's gone off a cliff. We're delayed. I don't know what's going on. Can you pick up the phone and yell at someone at standards, please?
So effectively, Steve could contact the standards and say, yeah, how are these standards coming along? What is there anything to report back to the absolute wider community?
I'll tell Steve what I can. And if that's not matching what you're getting from your committee member, if you've got a committee member, then you guys need to have a talk. Or if you don't have a committee member, I could still give Steve all that information if you guys are just interested as well. And I shouldn't encourage this, but I'll tell you, if you write a letter to the CEO, he'll read it. We get put into his office. He doesn't flick them to his secretary and the executive system, and forget about them. He reads everything. Please email us first. But yeah, if you ever get stuck, the boss will read.
Getting a bit of a flavor of how powerful this process is, and going back to your comment, Chaim, is that if we are silent on this and it gets standardized, and then we've also got consultants that are using AI, which are producing scopes and which is based on the standard, well, we're making our own bed in terms of what we're going to get. So, yeah, I'm going to try to represent us as best we can to get the best outcome for our facilities through this process. So,
Yeah, we had a saying at standards. We have a lot of sayings at standards, but one of them is the standards are developed by the people who show up. So if you're not on the committee, you haven't asked to be on the committee, you don't see, you're not making public comment, it's hard to get upset if you don't like what's in the document. So contribute, yell at us, write to us, pick up the phone, talk to Steve, make your voice heard. It's the only way you'll have any sort of impact on the process.